So it's a good year for 3D cameras. I got to try out the XReal Beam Pro, and let's take a look at some thoughts about that and some camera tests. You'd be excused for thinking this is a smartphone, because it's basically everything but the phone part. It's a pocket-sized Android device. One of the intro screens mentions the XReal glasses, which are a display that you wear. You don't need those though. This just shoots normal full width SBS, what for stills in full frame or 16:9 for video. If you do get their glasses, it has two USB ports on the bottom, USB-C rather. Ones you can use for charging and one that connects directly to their glasses to watch the videos in 3D. And speaking of that intro screen, you might have noticed it called the video spatial, this whole rebranding of 3D. Again, the home screen, just a normal Android home screen, but you'll notice the camera icon is big and sizable, and there's two of them by default. In the camera settings, you can choose more efficient or more universally compatible, such as H.264 or 5, or whether or not you want your photos saved as JPEG. Now I'm filming this with the iPhone 15, and considering that this XReal Beam Pro is actually, they said it's going to be released later this year, no specifics yet, but it'll be released as a 5G phone. I don't know if it'll be in the US, hopefully, because that'll give people who use Android an opportunity to have a 3D phone. I mean, you can get a used red hydrogen one, but in some areas, such as mine, you really need 5G at this point to get usable signal. So anyway, I'll do some comparison shots with the iPhone 15 and the XReal Beam Pro. First of all, the interaxial is a big improvement over the iPhone 15. Well, at least that's what some people would say. I think they're both useful. I think a small interaxial is good to have, and a large one is good to have. There's pros and cons to each. But this one is wider set. It's just under 2 inches. And for comparison, here they both are side by side. You can see how much smaller the iPhone's interaxial is. And the XReal Beam Pro also has a wide field of view when taking pictures. It's also more apparent, especially in closer up shots, that the iPhone, as we mentioned before, has a discrepancy. The primary lens, which usually when holding it is the lens on the right. Currently I'm filming it upside down, so it's the lens on the left, but usually the lens on the right is primary, and it's the better lens. It's not only clearer, but also is capable of shallow depth of field. And the other lens has a flat focus and is lower resolution. So you'll notice that discrepancy in some of the iPhone comparison shots, and that actually can be a little uncomfortable sometimes when you get that shallow depth of field in only one eye. That being said, I wouldn't say the video quality, which is 1080p, of the XReal Beam Pro is outstanding, but it's decent. It's definitely good. Another thing that's interesting is the frame rate. There have been some high frame rate 3D consumer camcorders, such as the small cheap ones. They recorded in 720p, that was half width. Really shouldn't even call it HD. At 60 frames a second, and some pro models that recorded full width 720p, 60 frames a second. Again, that's not the standard frame rate most things are filmed at. That's like a buttery smooth motion. I personally love it and wish it was more common. So anyway, the first consumer camcorder that could do that at full HD was the Kucam Ego, full width 1080 60p. And now we've got the XReal Beam Pro. This also has the option of full width 1080 at either 30 frames a second or 60. And again, going back to the interaxial, a lot is said about how wider spacing is better, but you'll see from these video clips, the depth from the iPhone is also pretty decent. It's definitely there. It's not flat or anything like that. It doesn't have to be right up on things to have a good depth. But obviously the Beam Pro is going to be stronger. Okay, now I'm about 3 feet or so from the lenses. Okay, now I'm about 3 feet or so from the lenses. And low light performance is definitely a weaker point. Alright, here I am indoors. I wouldn't call it, it's relatively low lighting, but it's still bright daylight. Got a lamp on in here. Let's see how the video quality ends up. And the sound while we're at it. And the depth, because relatively wide-spaced lenses, so let's see how the depth ends up when you're holding it at arm's length. And while we're at it, even lower light, just a soft light in the bathroom, no daylight. I can tell right now on the screen itself that it looks pretty noisy. See how that turns out. And even in a well-lit indoor room with plenty of sunlight, that was just low enough light where blur would be introduced if you weren't careful. Like this picture I took of the lamp, the first time, just the slightest movement caused it to be blurry, and the second time I was still as a statue. I like had to be super conscious of it and barely touch the button to take the picture. But of course, outdoor shots are not going to be a problem. And less than $200, this camera is a good deal. Gone are the days when you have to hunt down a Fuji W3. I mean, you can. If you must have that 10 times optical zoom, if that's what it was, I believe. And honestly, the W3, while it's a nice camera, it looks nice, feels nice, the build of it has a nice big juicy glasses-free 3D screen. Honestly, the pictures it takes are prone to noise, compression. It's showing its age. And with new options on the market, a lot of these old camera models are simply being devalued. Unless there's specific features that you absolutely need in a certain model, then for a lot of 3D videographers and photographers, they can simply be replaced with newer models which are better in some ways and a lot easier to operate and not ancient by electronic standards. The only hiccup I had was when I used the normal USB port. Again, there are two of them, to plug into my computer to transfer the files. I couldn't get it to recognize it as a storage device. In one of the 3D groups, George Themelis, I hope I'm pronouncing that right again, but he mentioned that you would use the USB port for the glasses, which I never would have guessed because that's marked for the glasses, but apparently that's how you access the storage. But I ended up just logging into my Google Photos and having them backed up that way and downloading them off the cloud. So yeah, if you're in the market for a new 3D camera, portable, simple, good quality, this is a great deal. If you don't mind a little bit smaller interaxial and you are an iPhone user anyway, then you may just want to use an iPhone or an iPhone 16 coming out. We've talked about that a little bit. We'll talk more in a coming video. Or if you want a step up, again, I keep mentioning it, but the camera from Acer, I am excited to try that. It looks really good. But the nice part about it is options. Isn't it nice to have options? I've said it before, I'll say it again. Being a 3D fan is like being in the underground. Whether it's finding movies, networking with people or distributors around the world, buying hacked Blu-ray players, ripping exclusives from international streaming services, or hunting down electronics. It's always been some kind of a underworld operation, but it's nice to have some products that you can just buy new, like it was 2011 or something. Buy it on Amazon, go figure. But we'll take it while it lasts. See you next time. So anyway, I'll do some comparison. Again, that's not the standard frame